Welcome back to Rollin Illini here on WPGU 107.1, and UPTV is here, back in business. It's so nice to be back, and now we're getting thousands of emails yet again from professors, but we're back from spring break.
You sound so well rested.
You just
right
sound
now.
so like at peace.
You know, I just crossed a guy I knew on the sidewalk, and he's like, "You look exhausted, Ryan." You're right. I just had pneumonia, but I'm okay.
I think you look great. All right, you're a champion. You're
You
a
look
warrior.
real sharp. You got a new haircut.
Thanks.
He's more aerodynamic now.
Yes.
Several years younger.
That hair matches the chair now. It's all new.
Anyway, yes. What did you do over spring break, James? I know you were busy, as were Will and I, but we'll find that out because we got quite a show.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time working with the old folks back at this living home. As I told, I think, Will and Ryan, that I am a waiter for the oldies back home. And that was pretty cool because a good number of them do know that I'm in school. So when I come back, they always check in and, they're excited for me to graduate and told me to come back when I, get my diploma and when I get a job. And a couple of them were kind of sad.
So do you have like a little fan club then?
Just a little bit.
It sounds that way.
They're like all like my grandparents, basically. They're like, just rooting for me to win. So that's cool. And also, I had the chance to visit with some family and do a little interviewing for some stories I'm working on, or a story I'm working on. Yeah.
Very interesting.
And you were all over the place.
Yeah, well, I was in the Smoky Mountains.
You were smoking in the mountains?
No, I was in Smoky Mountains.
Oh,
I was
okay.
in the
Just
Smoky
clarifying.
Mountains. Jeez, my goodness. But we did a lot of hiking. It was awesome. So we hiked a couple trails. So just, some time away from school and technology. It was awesome. It was a little retreat, basically.
Sweet. So I got sick. No, actually, I was sick. Did homework, I slept, and then I got sick. But that's okay. We're back. But, James, so tell us about this interview you did. Will and I also did an interview with a New York Times guy. We'll hear that in a bit. But to stick with Illinois here, James, run us through your highlights.
All right. So I had the chance to talk to Joey Peters, who is a former Illinois gymnast. He actually just finished up competing, I want to say maybe last year officially. But actually had the chance to cover the team a couple years ago, so I knew him. But he's heavily involved with research right now involving pressure ulcers in adaptive sports and people with disabilities. So I talked to him about how he even got involved with that, out of finishing up his career. And it was quite an interesting conversation because one of the coolest things he said was that he got involved with studying adaptive sports, specifically wheelchair racers, because of how much he used their upper body. And he was saying he could relate to that, really just the wear and tear of that, because gymnasts use so much of their upper body. So I talked to him about that because I'm working on a story about basically his journey from being a world-class athlete. Like he was really, really good. In a top-tier program, Illinois, for gymnastics, to kind of not having the career he wanted in the end due to injuries and things like that, and how he's kind of found a new passion by studying adaptive sports in ways to, one, maximize an athlete's potential as far as the wheelchair racers, but also keep their long-term health in mind. So, for example, a lot of the times they'll have chairs. Their wheelchairs they're you've seen them. They're strapped in, and they're super tight, and they're based mainly solely for performance. But he wants to kind of find that line between what's the deal between maximizing performance but also keeping long-term health involved, because when they're strapped in like that, without having senses in their legs and whatnot, they'll develop pressure ulcers from like pushing and tugging and sitting in the same spot, not getting that blood flow through their body, through their legs, and through the rest of their body. So he was just saying he understands where they're coming from because they want to be the best, obviously, but there is a fine line between, pushing yourself to the limit of your athletic career, but also not pushing yourself too far where, after you're done, you're relegated to doing nothing, or being in a lot of pain afterwards. So that's it in a nutshell, but I'll have a lot more words to say it in a few weeks. But yeah, it was very cool to talk to him and just kind of hear how his perspective changed from joining the university as an athlete and then kind of helping out as an assistant over at Dress. So yeah.
One thing you talked to me about right after class a couple days ago is you saw there's a bit of a comparison where Joey mentioned that with gymnastics, so much of it requires the upper body, and then likewise with para-athletics, a lot of those athletes, have to push around in their wheelchairs. I mean, is there anything you want to comment on that about how that even came up? 'Cause I think it's a pretty fun story.
I had kind of had the question. I was going to ask him, like, hey, like, did your injuries have anything to do with you wanting to help others that have had injuries or trying to push through something? And he was just kind of like, yeah, but I feel like it kind of gave him in a sense, not that he could like understand fully what, adaptive athletes are going through or what they've, been through, but he could empathize in a sense because he's had major injuries to the upper body. I think he's torn his rotator cuff and had a couple other like big, long layoffs due to injuries. So when he's helping rehab, helping athletes and just people with disabilities in general rehab from upper body injuries, he kind of knows where they're coming from and how hard of a grind it is to get back. So it was very cool to see how gymnastics and wheelchair racing and wheelchair sports kind of have that parallelism when it comes to using their upper body.
Like you, James, I actually covered the men's gymnastics team. I did it last year, so I'm familiar with Joey Peters, and I'd like to reiterate that he was an exceptional gymnast back in the day. He did the all-around, but he did have a lot of injuries, especially by his senior year when I was covering him after he'd already sat out like a year before or something along those lines.
So you talked about, James, how Joey is involved with Dress. What exactly does he do?
So, in a sense, he's like a research assistant for the wheelchair racers. So basically, he'll help them through rehabs, and he also conducts a bunch of studies where I know we went downstairs one time. We saw him pushing on the rollers. He'll analyze data from that to see which points in their chair are probably the most stressful on their bodies, and he'll use that research to kind of, create a database or like basically get all the stats in one place where he can kind of show that that there are a lot of bad ways of treating your body when you're a top tier adaptive athlete. So, for instance, he does a lot of research, like I said, pertaining to pressure ulcers. So his interest is in how pressure ulcers kind of develop in wheelchair racing and how it's kind of, going to get, how he hopes to kind of fix that, alleviate that, and make more athletes aware of that. So that's his role. And he also travels on the road with the team. He'll
basketball.
He'll hang out with the team. He's very close with a lot of the track athletes. So he told me, as expected, Tatiana McFadden is a beast. And Amanda Groy is a beast.
Good to know.
And he's also, working right underneath Adam Blakeney. So he, said he looks up to Adam Blakeney a lot as a coach. But he'll travel on the road with the team, keep statistics, help them with their chairs, whatever's going on in that sense. So there's the research aspect, but also like the hands-on, being there every day for them aspect as well. So pretty cool stuff, if you ask me.
Interesting, James.
Yeah.
I'm glad you had that experience. And we'll definitely hear more about that going forward. But
Stay
just
tuned.
to go off of that, I know Amanda McCrory, she is one great person. I'll just add that. So she was posting on her social media accounts kind of the balance she tries to find between working hard, resting, and gotta have fun too. I think that's related to kind of what Joey Peters is referencing in terms of if I grind out these workouts every day in an attempt to catch up to Tatiana McFadden, how will I feel when I sleep? Or will I sleep? I don't think I'll sleep.
Yeah, and one interesting point you bring up, Tatiana, he was saying, like, she really takes care of her body. Like, she's very, very, very good about her body. Like, people, a lot of the highlights or, like, the most memorable moments, I guess, of her workouts or just seeing her train or coming across her is just, like, the big time feats when she's pushing hard or when she's, like, lifting this. But there's also those down moments where she's resting muscles and not using certain muscles and taking days to, like, work on something else and not, over, using her muscles or overusing her body to an extent where it's kind of being a negative, So it was cool. And he said he learned a lot from her in that sense and how to take care of the body. So maybe I shouldn't eat as much garbage as I do, but.
And then you'll win, 17 medals.
Because that's just how it goes, Ryan. You give up the McChickens and you just start winning gold.
I thought that's how it worked.
For your kids, probably McDoubles.
Maybe it's the bacon McDouble.
Oh,
That's
there we
what
go.
it is.
Don't forget the bacon.
Yeah, interesting stuff. And I know Will and I were also doing some Rollin Illini stuff over break, and we had a chance to talk with Ben Spiegel of the New York Times, the real New York Times, and he is a Paralympic reporter. He was in Pyeongchang for the Winter Paralympics. He was the only American reporter from a major media outlet, of course, besides NBC. And we got to learn about that experience, learn about his photographer and the New York Times approach to covering a Paralympics. So we'll probably take a quick break and come back with that fun interview. We'll be right back. All right, welcome into a special edition here on Illini here on WPGU 107.1. And UPT Will Gerard here, James Boyd, Ryan Wilson, joined by Ben Spiegel of the New York Times, Paralympic reporter. Ben, you were out in Pyeongchang, South Korea, just came back. Now, when you reflect on your experience, what comes to mind?
It really was an exceptional experience. It was a fun almost 2 weeks that I was there, and the range of sports that I was able to see was incredible. It was a competition filled with athletes performing at the highest level, and it was an overall wonderful experience. I'm glad I was able to go and chronicle it in the event the best that I could.
Mm-hmm. So when you've covered different major sports, but how is it different when you cover a Paralympic Games, for example, and you're trying to chronicle the experiences? What is the access like?
The access at the Paralympics?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty good, I would say. I prefer the access before the competition gets underway, because you're not sort of confined by the mix zone and time and other people asking questions, and so it's easier to arrange things in advance. And I've found that I get a lot of reporting done in the 3, 4, 5 days, however long it is, that I'm in town before the actual games start. And once the competition starts, as I said, you're sort of at the mercy of the mix zone opportunities. There are exceptions, but beforehand, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and email some of the press attaches from countries and or from sports that I know I want to go ahead and report on. If there are particular athletes I need to speak with, just to kind of give them a heads up, and also ask for my purposes when they're going to be available. And in many, many cases they are, and I find that a lot of aside from the athletes who were pretty much uniformly gracious and accommodating, so are the press attaches from different nations, and are willing to work with you to figure out convenient times, perhaps away from the venue, whether it's at the Paralympic Village where the athletes stay, or somewhere else even, to go ahead and allow you to go ahead and do your work.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Hey Ben, this is producer man Will Gerard on the other line here. One question I have for you is I would like to know what your background experience is of covering para athletics and how an event like the Paralympics compares to other major sporting events you've covered in the past. This is my third Paralympics, so I was asked to go ahead and cover them for the first time in Sochi, and I didn't know what our plans were for afterward. I surmised that the office was pleased with the coverage, but I wasn't quite sure whether it was a one-off or whether we were going to continue in the future. And then my boss asked me if I wanted to do Rio, and so I did Rio, and then I figured, okay, well, we're on to something. And then it was on to Pyeongchang, so I did that. So I've had some experience now, and what I found is it is a very much a huge event, and what I didn't realize before Sochi was exactly how huge it was, just the entire scope of it, from the venues to the number of people there. I mean, it really is just, I think I read somewhere where it's like the third biggest international sporting event in the world, which I presume only trails the Olympics and the World Cup, but I don't know if I want to make assumptions. And it really is just a huge, huge event. And I wrote about this for this first-person piece that I did for the paper, for the website, was how weird it is to be at an event of this scope while also being pretty much the only American sporting, only American reporter from a major outlet present. I'm so used to being at major events, whether it's the Super Bowl or World Series or who knows what, and I realize that those events are largely contested in the United States, but there's just a huge American press contingent, and it's like when the Olympics are over with, everyone goes home, and then either the international press corps stays or other members come back, and they treat it, I don't know if they treat it like the Olympics, but there's certainly more interest, I would say, from a lot of other countries than there is in the United States.
So why do you think that is? Not as many major media outlets are interested in covering a Paralympics as compared to an Olympics.
I think a lot of it, I think there are a few factors, and this is just me conjecturing. I don't know if this is true or not. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact their recent time zones. I think that Sochi being 9 hours ahead for most of it, 8 hours ahead, and South Korea being 14 hours ahead and 13 hours ahead, people just can't get on the same day. I think that there's more poignantly with the state of American news media and the journalism business is that news organizations don't have as many resources, and they just can't go ahead or are unwilling to. And I suppose in a bottom line business, I don't know if I sympathize with them or I agree with them, but I sort of understand that if you're trying to cut corners and you've already gone ahead and either blown your budget or sent people to go ahead and cover the Olympics for 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever it is, to either ask them to stay over or to send other people over for another huge event, it's cost prohibitive. And so I say that I'm the only reporter from a major American news outlet there. I don't know who else would really go aside from perhaps Sports Illustrated or ESPN or maybe the Washington Post or the Journal. Perhaps USA Today. There really aren't a lot of us who have the resources and or the interest in sending people over, and I'm grateful that we take it seriously because obviously the athletes justly deserve as much attention and exposure as they can get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ben. One thing I noticed in your story about the loneliness of a Paralympics reporter is you talk about how you want the focus of the athletes to be on the athletes rather than their impairment. Have you noticed that being kind of common among other outlets outside of the Times? Do you feel like there's been appropriate focus of that among the media? I don't know, and I would say that I would never go ahead and tell anyone to go ahead and how they should go ahead and do their jobs. I think that a lot of times people get enthralled with, and I understand just the backstories of these athletes and the circumstances that they've endured and how they've reached the pinnacle of their sport. And they're incredible athletes, whether they're impaired or not. And I think that there's that natural proclivity to focus on their impairment, how they became impaired, and what they've done to overcome. And in my mind, and I wrote this, is that I have no idea how I could go ahead and distinguish among all of these incredible athletes and tell one person's story from another. It's like, how would I go ahead and tell back to my boss and say, I should go ahead and write about the snowboarder who lost her hand in a woodworking accident when her class, her professor couldn't figure out how to stop the machine, and her hand was caught in this woodworking machine for an hour. And she kept calm, and then she didn't have a hand anymore. Why should I go ahead and focus on that compared to the guy who got parts of both arms bitten off by two great white sharks? I mean, what makes one either more or less interesting than the other? And I feel that the best way to cover this event, and I'm glad that my office agrees, is to not focus on an individual athlete unless the athlete tells a broader, more global story, and to sort of focus on things that are more thematic and that could reach a broader audience. So that's what we're trying to do. The New York Times is based in New York, but it's an international and a national paper, and so we want to write stories and report stories that as many people will read around the country. And if you might see something that is about a particular athlete, no matter how incredible a story it is, I think that my office feels that you're more likely to draw people in if it could reach a broader range of people. And so that's what we go ahead and try to do.
Sure. So how do you think the New York Times intention of covering the Olympics changed from Pyeongchang to Sochi?
Meaning the Olympics or the Paralympics?
The Paralympics.
I don't think it has at all, because I feel that I would say the only difference is that I'm much more, I hesitate to use the word comfortable, but I sort of have a much better feel for the rhythms of covering the event and the types of stories my office is interested in. And so I put pressure on myself to meet that standard and to figure out, okay, well, these are the types of stories that I did in Sochi. Here are the types of stories that I did in Rio. I want to have a nice mix of fun stories, of weightier stories, of just interesting things that people hadn't considered. And maybe they'll read it and say, oh, well, that's interesting. I'm glad I invested 5 minutes into clicking on this link or reading it over coffee in the morning. So I don't really think that our coverage or our approach to coverage has evolved. I think we do it the same way. I think almost that there's a greater emphasis on our end to go ahead and just pursue these stories. And I know that my office, having allocated the resources to go ahead and send me there, wants a good return on its investment.
Sure. Okay. So I guess with Sochi, do you feel like some media outlets might have been interested in covering the Paralympics just to get the experience of being in Russia and having an inside look at Russia?
I don't know. I mean, we didn't discuss that when I was there, and I don't really know. I mean, there weren't any other American outlets there either. So I've been the only one, as I can tell, except for in Rio, there were journalism students from the University of Georgia who were there, sort of working in partnership with the Associated Press. So I almost feel like I'm in this little bubble of stuff that I want to do, and I don't know if that answers your question, but I don't think about what other newspapers or news organizations are going to be writing, because I don't feel like I really need to worry about them. I feel that whatever my stories are interesting stories, and that my office isn't paying attention necessarily to what The Guardian is writing about the Paralympics and feeling as if I got beat on a story that The Guardian wrote because they're happy with the other stuff that I'm producing. So
Yeah, just to pivot in a different direction, who are some of your favorite athletes to cover during this particular Paralympics, or maybe in the past as well? And how does it feel now that Paralympics have finally come to a close? I mean, have the past 2 weeks just been a complete blur for you?
yes, athletes have been a complete blur. I'm sitting here right now, and it's 2:20 in the afternoon, and my body thinks it's 3:20 in the morning tomorrow. And so that is extraordinarily bizarre. But I mean, it really is. It's an immersive experience because all you're doing for those 2 weeks is focusing on what you have to do at the Paralympics, right? I mean, I talk to my family as much as I can back home and my office when I need to, but even that's when it's the Paralympics. It's otherwise, it's figuring out where I need to be and when, who to talk to, what I'm talking to them about, what my deadlines are, I mean, all that sort of stuff, and that's all you're really focusing on. And so you're living this life, and it's the same with any major sporting event that I've covered, whether I cover the Olympics in 2008 in Beijing, or every time I cover a Super Bowl or whatever, where that's just your life for that time that you're there, and it's totally governed by what time something is, and deadlines, and word count, and all that stuff. And so it's enjoyable, but it can be a little bit stressful. As far as your first question goes, there are a ton of athletes who are just terrific. I mean, the one great thing that I like about our approach is that we're not limited to just covering American athletes. And so if I want to go ahead and talk to a Canadian skier or an Australian snowboarder or a British, cross-country skier or a Norwegian, I mean, from any country, they're obviously available if you can figure out if you guys speak the same language or get an interpreter. And so you meet all these really interesting people. And I had some really good chats with some Canadian skiers. I talked with, I can't even think of all these folks now, but everyone's just really thoughtful. And it's enjoyable from my perspective to be able to go ahead and be in the mix zone after these guys compete, after these men and women competed, and you're not talking necessarily about the competition as much. You can ask them questions about their lives and about hardships they endure from a financial standpoint, or about rules of competition, or anything else, and they're more than happy to go ahead and answer them for you, and I find that refreshing.
Did you have a favorite moment from the games?
It's tough because I'm the only person, and so I don't see everything. I do think that of the stuff that I witnessed, they were just sort of these cool little, snapshots almost. Like being in the sled hockey venue, just seeing the Korean fans go crazy when Korea scored in overtime to beat the Czech Republic. That's cool, it's the home country. The fans are really into it. The players are really into it. That's enjoyable. It was cool to go ahead and be at the Alpine skiing venue, and this guy Andrew Kirka, who I spoke with, 4 or 5 days earlier, 3 days earlier, he had crashed in Sochi on a training run before the downhill, so he couldn't run the downhill. And he broke his back, and he came back 4 years later, and he won gold in that event. And you could just see how much it meant to him. He had a streak of breaking a bone for 7 straight years. And he broke his femur, he broke a vertebra. That's all over the place. And to have overcome that, and the mental anguish of having crashed in that sit ski and coming back 4 years later to win gold in that event, that was just cool to see. Because I knew firsthand from talking to him what that experience was like. So if I had to guess top of my head, those were a couple things. I'm sure there's more. If you asked me, a week ago, I'm sure I might have had a different answer.
How were your interactions with your staff photographer, Chang Lee? I know that was one name you mentioned in your story. It sounds like
He's the
most
best.
of your interactions occurred with.
Oh, he's my guy. I totally love that man. I mean, Chang is from South Korea. He moved to the States when he was 18. Totally fascinating guy and one of the most incredible photographers I've ever seen. And he was basically my chauffeur, my restaurant guide, my companion. He was like everything for me for 2 weeks. And so we spent pretty much close to every waking moment together because of coordinating transportation. Chang had a car, and so we wouldn't really use the transportation network of all the buses there because he had a car in the parking pass. The exception was to the Nordic skiing venue where he couldn't, where we didn't have access there. But everywhere else we drove. And so we talked in the car and we talked about all kinds of things. And we always have dinner. And Chang, I like a good meal. Chang likes a good meal. And so I didn't know Korean. And Chang knew all these places from being there for the Olympics. And so he was sort of like my spirit animal. Wherever he wanted to go, I followed. And I totally adore Korean food now. And I tried things that had I been on my own, I probably wouldn't have eaten. And so I had a much different experience covering the Paralympics because of Chang than I otherwise would have if the photographer hadn't been as familiar with everything or had a car or just basically wasn't Chang. So he totally enriched and enhanced it.
Was there a similar setup for you with with the prior games in terms of the interactions you had with your photojournalists?
So what we normally do in moments in things like this is we either, depending on where the games are, and so it's only my third time, that if there's a staff photographer there, then I'll work with the staff photographer, or we get a freelancer. And so in Sochi, I work with a guy named James Hill, who's another prince of a guy who's based in Moscow. And so he would just go ahead and stay in my hotel. And so we would go places together. We'd travel on the bus, or I'd meet him, and we'd have a couple of meals together. But it was a much different experience. In Rio, the photographer I worked with was Leanne Milton, who's tremendous, and she lived there. And so we wouldn't get there, we wouldn't travel together because she'd be coming from her apartment in Rio, and I'd be getting there from where I was. And we'd just kind of meet somewhere and then kind of go off on our separate ways. She had a fiance who was there, and I had, my stuff, and so we kind of go in separate directions. And it wasn't good or bad, it was just how it was. And she was tremendous to work with, and I totally work with her again, given the opportunity. But having, each setup is a little bit different in what it lends itself to. And the fact that Chang had a car was tremendously necessary because even with fewer sports at a Paralympics, it's all sort of dependent on where things are, where everything is laid out. And so you had curling and hockey down in Gangneung, which is about 40 minutes away from Pyeongchang, where biathlon was and cross-country skiing was. But the other stuff, like the alpine, the downhill, and the Super G, and all the alpine stuff, and snowboarding, were about 40 minutes away in the opposite direction. And so you really had to pick and choose what you wanted to do, and travel time was just cut off. I mean, I don't know how much time we saved to travel by not going on buses, by having to go ahead and take the bus from our hotel to this other place where we had to go and pick up this other bus to get here, and you're just like waiting, and you're spending all these times on buses, and Chang was just driving around. And we would go ahead and stop for lunch and have some good cold buckwheat noodles, and that made everything worth it.
Nice. So you talk about the food in Pyeongchang, but how was it?
It was awesome, man. I'm telling you, I would go back yesterday and have some of this stuff. We ate at this one restaurant like 2 nights in a row because there were too many things on the menu that Chang wanted to order the first night, but we didn't, and so we went back the second night and kind of figured out what we didn't get and that we wanted to. I mean, it was, and what I really wasn't aware of, I mean, I didn't know a whole lot of things about Korea before I went, was just sort of how I don't want to say provincial in a bad way, but there are all these sort of small towns, and 70% of Korea is mountains, which I didn't know. And so you would have all of these little villages that are separated by mountains, and the way that food is prepared and what is grown here is different, perhaps, than the next town over. And so they develop these different ways of cooking things and different ingredients and different regional and local specialties. And so the kimchi that we might have here tastes different or is prepared differently from how it was in this town on the other side of the mountain. And so you just experience this whole range of flavors. And even Chang, there were many times he'd say to me, well, I didn't even know this existed. I never had this growing up, or I didn't try this during the Olympics or what have you. And so it was fun to sort of discover things along with him.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that is just about all the time we have. Thank you so much, Ben. Really appreciate it.
No, hey, thanks for having me, Neil, guys. I appreciate it.
We're back. Rollin here, WPGU 1071, UPTV, James Boyd, Will Gerard, Jason Leggett. I'm Ryan Wilson. Man, this show is loaded with content. I need a nap, but I won't.
All right, push through.
You just gotta push through. We're on the
Push
home
through.
stretch now.
And then I'll
Only a
just
few minutes.
clap. 13 minutes. No, so we have some more Amanda McCrory stuff. Amanda is just on fire today with everything. So, she, outside of publishing an interesting article, we'll get back to that. She raced in the Shamrock Shuffle with a green afro and wearing a green morph suit. Of course, her face was spray painted green or whatever. All green.
Completely greened out.
Yeah, if you want to take a look at that, it's on Twitter, Facebook, Rollin.
A lot of fun pictures.
She definitely looks like a certain Marvel superhero.
She might be the Hulk.
But, thank you to her for sharing those pictures with us.
Yeah, those are epic,
It seems
man.
like she had a lot of fun in Chicago.
Yes.
With some of her friends.
So much fun, she won. It was a small race. She beats two other competitors, and Illinois racer Brian Seaman also won on the men's side. He was the only racer, so of course he won. But good for him.
I like those kind of races. I need one of those.
A small race, just an 8K, not a full marathon.
I hope he still got some sort of medal.
Yeah, of course. The Bank of America Shamrock Shuffle, just about 5 miles. That would take me about an hour.
Just an epic St. Patty's Day celebration.
Yes. But Amanda also did some fascinating things on a blog post. So she posted this article online. She was a guest blogger, and she wrote an article called A New Perspective Through the 2018 Paralympics. So I know before the show, when we first came in the building, James and Will were just ecstatic about this article. Tell me, what's going on, guys? Why is this so fascinating?
She broke it down, man.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, honestly, just from start to finish. One, I was joking with Ryan. It's like watching Spotlight before you have to write a big, long form story or something. Like it got me pumped up about what we're doing here with Rollin Illini. But she kind of dove into how inspiration is kind of used and misused when it comes to Paralympic athletes.
The word inspiration?
Yeah, or just the I guess the essence of it when it comes to Paralympic athletes, and how they're like worshipped for doing things that are really sometimes have nothing to do with like their sport, but just everyday tasks. Where she's like, if, for instance, getting the class, Ryan, is an accomplishment for you, or is
It really is.
like what kind of expectation or what do we think your standards are as for, and when I want to say we, I mean able-bodied people. Like, what am I looking at you as? So she kind of dived into how it's unfair to just solely focus on an athlete's disability or just a person in general's disability without looking at all the other factors that make them who they are. So.
Yeah, I saw a lot of parallels to the discussion we had with Ben that just aired a few minutes ago, even, and kind of talking about the way that he wanted to portray a lot of these para athletes when he was in his time in Pyeongchang, in terms of, not focusing so much maybe on the backstories of these individuals, as opposed to kind of, really showing their how accomplished they are in their fields, and how, really focusing on the sport. One line that I really liked a lot from Amanda's blog post is she said, "Let's consider the idea of a disability as functional diversity." So I think that's an interesting perspective, kind of getting outside of the mold of just looking at someone with a disability and, kind of approaching it as, oh, look, there's someone in a wheelchair, they're doing this, but rather kind of, looking at how accomplished they are. I mean, one thing, even through our experience that we've had throughout the year with Rolling Illini, I think this is something that's definitely struck a chord with me, I'd say. Kind of getting, seeing a lot of these athletes up close and personal and kind of becoming aware of, just how good they are at what they do. So.
So when she says functional diversity, what does that mean?
I think the way I interpreted it, was that she was saying it's, obviously something, a way to categorize people as far as like, obviously the different minority groups and different groups in general when it comes to gender, religion, sex, and things along that nature. So, but I think what she was saying was it should not be viewed as a negative, a diverse aspect of someone. So just because you look at someone as having a disability, you shouldn't think that they aren't capable of doing something, or if they are doing something, it's like this remarkable feat. She was just saying, oh, like, this person used a wheelchair, and that's how they get the job done. And also she kind of introduces this notion of everyone having, not the same opportunities, but like, not looking at someone as having less of an opportunity because they have a disability. Oh, your legs don't work. Oh, they can't, like, do anything. Like, with it, like, no, they can still do amazing things. And by amazing, we don't mean, again, like, making it to class, brushing your teeth, I don't know, putting on your, like, shirt on your back. Like, we're talking about things that really make, like, what they've done, an accomplishment in not just the eyes of able-bodied people, but just people in general. So, again, it was a pretty inspiring piece, to say the least. She had some very, like, I guess, like, take it to the man moments in that article.
Yeah, and sticking to what she wrote, I know in the following paragraph, I think this kind of sums it up well. She says, "In this framework, each individual, not just those with disabilities, exists on a spectrum of functional ability, and each individual must push the boundaries and work within their abilities to achieve. There is no overcoming one's disability in order to accomplish these goals or reaching goals despite one's limitations. There's no reason an individual cannot be high-achieving and live with a disability. The two are not mutually exclusive." So, I think that sums it up well. It's great. It's important that those covering para athletics, really focus on athletic accomplishments.
Interesting. But I will say, I'll counter that.
Boom, boom, boom.
Of course, why not? Now, the International Paralympic Committee's goal, purpose, mission, motto, whatever, is to inspire. Huh? What? What? Why are we inspiring when Amanda doesn't want us to inspire? But actually, I say all of us, I think we're a part of the Paralympic movement. Our goal is to inspire and excite the world because of me. Maybe James. Probably Jason.
Nah, it's all you, Ryan.
Yeah. The world revolves around me. No, but the goal of the IPC as a sports-centered organization is to inspire and excite the world. The external result is our contribution to a better world for all persons with an impairment. To achieve this, relations with external organizations and the promotion of the Paralympic movement as a whole are of prime importance. So basically, our goal here is to change the world. That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, when you put it like that, you know,
Oh boy.
we got a long way to
Where do
go.
we start?
All right, what did we change today?
I think we made people think. But another thing to consider is that I always mention, like, I don't have a disability. I don't know what it means to have a disability. Like, is my life disabled? I mean, you could say it is, but I don't know what that means. And if you go to the World Health Organization,
Ooh,
man, we're getting
pull out them receipts,
we're
Ryan. Pull
we're
out
getting
them receipts.
scholarly today. So they say that the word impairment is more inclusive, which I think it is. I would argue that we all have an impairment of some sort, as we learned from Craig Spence of the International Paralympic Committee. I mean, James, you wear glasses.
And I do need them. I do.
It's okay, I'm sure
I wear
will.
glasses too.
Like,
Yeah,
trust
so-
me, this is not some
Contacts are in right
you
now.
know, Malcolm X Poindexter, like a, trying to be like smarter than what I am. Like, no, I need these.
But I mean, everybody has something. It's not like we're perfect. Maybe I guess I'm perfect.
I think you are.
Oh, thanks. At least one person.
Producer
does.
man, Will, he needs some work. We'll talk about it.
Need a haircut like me.
You're not lying.
No, I think everybody has something. I think you could say that stress and anxiety can be an impairment of some sort, a temporary impairment, because it affects how we perceive things. And with a physical impairment, you could say that it changes the way we live our lives, and I think that's true. That's a fact. Like, I can't go up steps. I can try. It might take a while. I think I could do it. I could definitely go down. That's easy.
I don't want to see you go down the stairs. Like, please don't. Like,
I mean, I used to be able to go
hop
down
on like an
steps.
ironing board and.
Well, funny story. I'm not doing that.
I was about to say, do you have an ironing board story you want to share?
Nope. But Ryan Chiguan, former member of the men's witch basketball team.
That was a good guy. I like him.
Yeah, so we're at a place together. Firehouse, we were there for just some food on campus. I guess a shout out to them. So they have the steps to the upper level. I'm not going up the steps. But of course, he can walk up the steps, and he carried the chair behind him, carried his own manual chair. He can walk. But when he came down, man, he's very courageous. He turned around in his manual chair, grabbed onto the side of the rail of the staircase, and he just backed down the steps. He hit every single step. It was kind of funny.
You know how strong you have to be to do that with one hand or one arm?
I'm not doing that one. Not in a million years. I might try. I might not wake up.
I feel like I would fall walking down the stairs backwards.
Right, yeah, so there are all types of way you can perceive impairments and disability, but I think to me the fact of the matter is that we all have some impairment, temporary, permanent, whatever, that changes the way we live our lives. With glasses, or with memory, or sleep and attention and perception. I have a whole list here, 207 pages. Yikes. Don't ask me to read this, because I never will.
Control F.
This is...
Control F if you need to find something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is called strategic reading. Not doing any of it.
Sounds like my approach to
sounds real
class.
familiar,
Woohoo!
No, but we do have some good stuff here, and it's 7 o'clock, right on the money. Time for a big paycheck. Never mind, I don't have anything. I'm sorry. But this has been another fun show of Rollin, and next week I think we'll have more on this topic and on some wheelchair basketball news.
You know I love
What?
buckets.
But
The Illini Marathon's coming up too. Illinois Marathon's coming up too.
Yes.
Don't forget about that either.
Of course.
We
Stay
need to
tuned.
start training for our
Stay
10K.
tuned.
Yeah, time for me to get ripped.
I will be
Yeah.
in peak condition come marathon. I'm leaving these two in the dust, okay?
Oh.
All right, well, I'm putting that out there right now.
I will go my max speed of 5.1.
That's a perfect pace for me.
All right, we'll see you next week for James Boyd, Will Gerard, Jason Liggett. I'm Ryan Wilson. This has been Rollin Line here on WPGU 1071 and UPTV. Adios.